Welcome to Conversations. I'm Suresh Kochatal. Before I start, I would request you to subscribe, like, and of course, share this channel with your friends and family. Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman tabled the economic survey document in the Lok Sabha on Friday, the January 31st, which is today. According to the survey, India's FY26 GDP growth is expected to be in the range of 6.3 to 6.8% amidst global uncertainty. Still a good number, not great as it was last year, but considering what's happening around the world, this number of 6.3 to 6.8 looks pretty good as compared to the rest of the countries which are now still in a slump. The survey expects inflation to remain under control while consumption could remain stable. It also expects rural demand to gain traction going forward. Now, there are some things which will be sorted out in the budget that will follow this, because one thing we know that food inflation is still high, especially on the vegetable side, but the government kind of seasonally takes care of these things, including the onion exports and other things. The question of consumption also is expected to be stable. Government is saying in this report that it could remain stable. But the question is, there needs to be money in the hands of people to spend. And this is where we are expecting a lot of incentives to come in by the way of the government in terms of the income tax, especially for the salaried class. We know that in India, just 1 to 2% of people pay income tax. That is roughly about 2 crore of the 140 crore population. But that's a very small number. But this 2% actually contributes 27% to the government's revenue stream. So imagine 2% of the people in Bharat are giving the government 27% of the total revenue that they're getting. And the rest of the kind of 98% contribute only to the rest of it. Of course, every person in this country pays taxes indirectly or directly. We know that GST is a major component, and everyone who buys anything from a soap to a shoe to a car pays GST. Anyway, let's go forward from this and look at other aspects of the economic survey. In fact, the economic survey of 24-25 has come within a short span of 6 months from the last one, because we saw that the last one, after the elections were held, the last survey was presented in July 2024 by Nirmala Sitharaman. In fact, this is going to be her 8th straight budget, which is a kind of a record actually. And of course, after the general election were held and the Modi government was sworn in, Nirmala Sitharaman tabled the economic survey then for 23-24 on July the 22nd. So there was a very short time of say 6 months, and then we have another economic survey that has just come up today. The economic survey, many people ask, and especially students who ask me, what is an economic survey all about? Well, it's a document that provides a detailed analysis of the economy with specific focus in certain sections. It is divided into 2 parts. The part A evaluates the economic performance, highlighting the fiscal trends and macroeconomic indicators, whereas part B analyzes the socio-economic issues such as education, poverty, climate change, along with projections for the GDP, growth, inflation, and of course, trade. So there are 2 parts to the economic survey, part A and part B, and that is being analyzed in detail as I'm speaking to you today. As per the convention, Nirmala Sitharaman has tabled the economic survey, which we saw today, which is a kind of a pre-budget detailed state of the economy document, which is usually presented a day ahead of the union budget. And in this case, FY 25-26 economic survey, key takeaways. What are those key takeaways that we need to look at from this particular one? I already spoke to you about the GDP fact, which is 6.3 to 6.8. And we're talking of consumption should be stable, rural demand could pick up. Well, these are all assumptions, by the way. They may or may not come true at the end of it, which we'll know only by end of next financial year. The survey also pointed out that despite the global uncertainty, India's real GDP of 6.4% in FY25 as a per first estimates, which is now just coming in fact, that is what is remaining and remains close to the decadal average. So average wise, if you look at the entire decade, more or less 6.4% is staying kind of in the same range as was indicated. As per the survey document, all sectors are performing well. Well, for me, this is a big thing because we are still assuming that certain sectors are not doing well, especially the manufacturing sectors. But the agriculture sector still remains strong, consistently operating well above the kind of trend levels that we are talking about. The industrial sector has also found a footing from the pre-pandemic days which we saw, and it's picking up, but it's still there, a long way to go. The robust growth in the recent years has brought the services sector to trend levels. India is basically a service sector economy. China is a manufacturing sector economy. Huge difference. We have a lot of catching up to do with China, not just us, many countries in the world need to do that. The survey also points out that the retail headline inflation, which we talk of, kind of softened at about 5.4% in FY24 to 4.9% in April-December 2024 due to various government initiatives, monetary policy measures, and other things that happened. The Reserve Bank of India also had gotten to action, as we saw recently, and therefore that kind of softening has happened out there. The survey also noted that the supply chain disruptions, extreme weather conditions, and of course consequent reduction in harvest in the agriculture sector were the key factors driving India's food inflation. Well, we know that two parts to it. One is the vegetable inflation, one is a kind of cereal inflation that is actually happening. So two things. Well, on a paddy-wise, rice has remained stable and wheat has remained stable, but the other factors, which is the perishable sector, is seeing a lot of churn that is happening there. The survey also highlighted the consistent decline in the gross non-performing assets ratio in commercial banks. This is a big thing. I mean, let me admit it. What Chidambaram had messed up, what Manmohan Singh had messed up in their 10 years of UPA 1 and 2 has been cleaned up to a large extent. We all know the famous Indian bank scandal and Kuttuvalakku Gopalakrishna, whatever his name was, the gentleman's name, the chairman of the bank. I mean, it was mess. India's NPAs were hidden by the banks. Just some window dressing was done to show everything was good. But now the government had cracked down over the last at least 8 years now, and the NPAs are now strictly under control. People might complain that the banks are still not lending as they should lend, but then the point is we should look at the banks' NPAs also. The banks need to be stable. The government has been pumping in a lot of money into the banking system, which again is getting a lot of criticism from economists who say this is not the right way to do it. Let the banks find their own money. But then somebody has to fund these banks, because at the end of the day, they have priority sector lending, especially to the agriculture sector, which is kind of not paid. And the governments, like we have in Telangana and other states, keep writing off these bank loans, and the banks don't get the money back in time. It's a big cycle that goes on and on and on. So banks need recapitalization, which is what is happening. Now, according to the survey, India's gross foreign direct investment, which is again a big thing for us because we know what's happening in the neighborhood in Pakistan and Bangladesh. So FY25 increasing from 47.2 billion in the first 8 months of FY24 to 55.6 billion in the same period of FY26, which is a year-on-year growth of around 17.9 or I think around 18% that comes to it. In fact, highlighting the significance of the deregulation in achieving the goal of Viksit Bharat. The economic survey, in fact, indicates Economic Survey 2025 exhorts and even says that India's modern growth, medium-term growth actually needs to come from a context of global realities. We look at the geo-economic fragmentation, China's manufacturing powers and strategic dominance. The survey also underscored that India's growth rate for the next decade requires a large investment in infrastructure. And we are seeing that happening already, especially in terms of the highways, the seaports, airports that are all being built up. But there still needs to be a huge amount of infrastructure that needs to be funded. We saw what happened in China, even though the Chinese game may have gone wrong in the real estate sector, but still China actually benefited from a huge infrastructure boom because all the sectors actually pick up with that. We have to raise our game for a new playing field, which is what kind of everybody, the chief economic advisor has been saying. We need the new playing field. The field has changed, and that is what we need to do. And the game is going to rely on the domestic drivers of growth. In fact, we have an aspirational goal. We all know that legitimate social and economic aspiration to become a developed country by 2047. And according to the economic survey, the government highlighted the deregulation, which is the key goal to Viksit Bharat. Now, we need to get into the fine print to see how the government is going to do this, what is the kind of deregulation, because still there is a feeling in India that doing business in India is not easy, despite all the things that the Modi government has done over the last almost 11 years now. there is still a lot more that needs to be done, because we are seeing the bureaucracy is still a major hurdles. Even though the union government might still have rolled out the red carpet, many states are still kind of having policies which are lopsided, where there are huge energy requirements, and states are also not doing their bit. And unless the states pick up the game, we saw a lot of states going to chief ministers going to Davos and making promises, getting investment, but the problem is walking the talk. We need to have that. In fact, China's manufacturing progress, as we saw, and the strategic dominance that we see today, that all happened because of the government support. But then somewhere along the way, the Chinese, the investors, the Chinese entrepreneurs all picked up and they ran the race, and they're way ahead of the rest of the world. The way forward for India to reinvigorate the internal engines and domestic growth and focus on economic freedom, the deregulation has to come. It has to happen right from the bottom to the top. And that is the main thing. The focus of reforms, in fact, and the economic policy that we're going to see in this next financial year must be on a systemic deregulation as a key agenda. In fact, for the ease of doing business 2.0 version. According to the economic survey, India's gross foreign direct investment, which I told you, has already gone up. We are doing very well there, year on year of 18%. All these are good numbers. But overall, when we look at the overall figures, we're looking at different things. For example, the merchandise stuff that we're talking about, overall exports have grown steadily in the first 9 months of FY25. We are seeing a growth around 6% year on year growth. India's external debt has remained stable, which is a good thing because we don't need to borrow when we have so much of foreign exchange lying with us. In fact, when you look at the external debt to GDP ratio, we are standing at around 19.4%, I think. And that is at the end of September 2024. So we need to see the latest updated figures as of December. That needs to come in maybe tomorrow or day after it will come in. The survey also highlighted a consistent decline in the GPAs, which we talked about. Banks need to lend a lot more because we know that it has consistently declined. In FY 2018 from 2.62% in 2024, it has declined to that much, which is a good thing. The peak was in FY 18, but now it's at 2.6%. And that is a good number actually to have. Banks need to clean up the balance sheets, no more hiding the numbers. If there is an NPA, it's an NPA, that's it. Either you create a provision, write it off, or waive it off, or do whatever you want. In fact, if you look at the survey, it underscored the credit to GDP ratio is also narrowed down to around minus 0.3% from Q1 FY25 from minus 10.3% in Q1 FY23, indicating that the recent growth that has actually happened credit is sustainable. So the credit growth that is happening recently is sustainable, but the banks need to be really careful when they are actually lending. India's insurance market, on the other hand, continues its upward trajectory with a total insurance premium growing around 7.7% in FY24, reaching 11.2 lakh crores. So it's a huge amount of money. The pension sector has also seen a significant growth, with the total number of pension subscribers growing by 16% year on year as on September 24, according to the economic survey. The survey also pointed out the retail headline inflation, which we spoke about. It is softening up there, but then there are many disruptions happening. And we have seen that in terms of either the weather or kind of foreign policies. We saw what happened in Ukraine, which affected the grains that we were procuring. We saw what happened with Russia in terms of our oil we were buying. So it is not just what happens within the country. It is also what happens from the rest of the world. We are not an island. We need to work with the rest of the world. There are certain things we need to buy, especially crude. No matter what we are doing on the side to ensure that we get into more of solar energy and other renewable energy, we still need to import a lot of crude oil. But we need to kind of reduce the dependence on that. We need to do a lot more things. President Trump may say drill baby drill because he's got shale oil in the US. He can still do it. He cares a damn for the environment, but then that's it. He says that's good for his country. So be it. In fact, despite all the challenges, there are positive signs for inflation management in India. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India and the International Monetary Fund project that India's consumer price inflation will gradually align with the target of around something like 4% in FY26. Now that we know what our economy looks like and the road ahead has been indicated to a large extent through the economic survey, let's wait for the union budget to be presented in the Lok Sabha. We will then know what really are the numbers all about. What's a government policy, especially with with a huge middle class population in India looking forward to a break in the income tax figures because we need to have spending. The middle class needs to have money in their hands to spend, and spending will actually again get the industry up. It will provoke a lot of spending when there's disposable income in the hands of the people, and that itself will perk up the economy and take it to a next higher level. Nirmala Sitharaman has a lot of things on her plate. Many people go on social media and criticize her. Let me just tell you that it is not her budget. She is presenting a budget for the government of India, especially under the advice of the Prime Minister and the cabinet. So it is not Nirmala Sitharaman and writing her own budget. No, it doesn't work that way. She puts everything together, takes it to the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister approves it, the cabinet approves it, and then it is presented to the Parliament. So ladies and gentlemen, wait. Let's see what happens with the budget, and then we'll take it up from there. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.